All right, so thanks everyone for attending. That's been like a great turnout for our first session. So I'm really pleased with that. So let me quickly introduce myself and David. So I am head of development at Toaster. So we are a relatively new creative agencies in London. And today we are gonna give you like a quick introduction to Polymer and a little bit of overview of web components as well. So together with me, and we are gonna have Davi as well, which is one of our tech leads in London. So why do we want to do this meetup? Why a Polymer meetup? Well, we know there is already a web components meetup. We also have James here for the web components meetup. Thank you for coming too. And we recognize definitely this technology is really important, and we feel it's going to be the future of the web and how the way you can split your app into components and the way you can separate all your JavaScript and the JavaScript is a new way. And it's going to be very good for the progressive apps in a progressive app context. And also, like in addition to the web components meetup, we want to provide a space for people to exchange ideas. And in future sessions, we will provide again coding sessions and workshops. So there also will be a space for everyone to present their own ideas and for getting, like, if you have any question, you're going to ask our own developers. They use Polymer in productions every day. And also we are going to leave a space for other projects to be presented in our meetup as well. And also because we are really interested in evolving these technologies, we are going to also invite in the next sessions a few of the Google developers, advocates. And a quick intro about Toaster, who is sponsoring these meetups, providing the space, providing the pizza and the beers. So a quick applause for Toaster. Thank you. And again, we are digital, relatively small, like around 70, 80 people. So across offices, we have offices, the headquarters in London is next to the Iceland, as you can see from here. And we have several offices across the world. We have offices and teams in San Francisco, in London, obviously, in Singapore, and in India. And we are a Google vendor. That means that we are an independent company. However, the majority of our work is done for Google as well, and we have the embedded team that work directly with Google in their office too. We use, again, as I said, we use Polymer and Python on Google App Engine every day in production on very, very large websites that attract millions of views. So we have proven the technology is working very well for us, and we have the luxury of not being constrained by old technologies, so we are really lucky with that. We typically support i11 Plus and the Evergreen browsers. And again, we do these high impact campaigns as well as brand identities and creative development and production. And also recently we've been involved with brand hacks, which are like quick sprints with third-party brands on behalf of Google. So that's all for the quick introduction. I think I can introduce you with Davi, our tech lead, that will be the moderator for today.
Sounds good.
And the pizza is still not here, so I think we can continue. We can continue with the first speech.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
Brilliant. Is that the thing? Are we going to clap? Is that the thing? Okay. We'll clap for each person then. Don't clap for me yet. So, yeah, I'm going to attempt to compare this. Don't worry, there'll be no jokes. I'm trying to get across with just having a bit of a dodgy accent. So, check out this room though. Like, I don't think I've ever been to a meetup with like an infinity. It's like I got quite like where the edge of the wall is and
It's definitely floating.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. And fire, it's just lovely. So, Yeah, so just wanted to sort of get an idea from people who's in development. Actually, who's a developer? Any developers here? There we go. Lovely. Yeah. Big up the producers. Any producers going on? Lovely. We've got all sorts. Has anybody used web components? There's audience participation. Anyone used Polymer before? Oh wow, quite a lot. That's cool. No, so it's great for us to get an idea of how many people use these sort of technologies, so we can produce better stuff in our later meetups and things like that. So really, my job is only going to be to just pass this on, and as pizzas are still on the no pizza. So I think we'll just start up and we'll move straight on to our first talk. So our first talk is going to be by a guy called Marco. See him right there. We'll pass in a second. So Marco's been a toaster for a while. He's a front-end developer here. I'll just start these slides. And he's been here at the start and the whole transition of the company from other technologies into Polymer. He's been part of that whole process. He's created a lot of the bootstraps that we work from, the scaffolds, and generally, I don't want to big him up too much, but yeah. Do we boop? I don't know. Okay, no, we'll just start. Alright, so Marco's going to talk about the intro to web components, and give him a clap.
So yeah, this is a Polymer Meetup, but before we should actually introduce everyone to web components, just to make sure that everyone is on the same page. This is me, I'm Marco, you can find me on Twitter. And I wanted to start with what was happening before the introduction of web components. A few problems that web components are trying to tackle down. Well, we have a lot of frameworks, I just put the major ones. But basically, the problem that we see with these frameworks is that you have to learn them, they are opinionated. You have actually to commit to a technology that is likely to change. You don't know the support in 2 years, 5 years. Another problem that we're trying to solve with web components is regression. Like you can actually now scope your slides, for instance, which is a big help. I think that everyone has probably broken a site by applying a CSS rule that actually was breaking other components, other people's code. Another problem that we see today is this explosion of tags. This is a screenshot from Inbox. I just took it half an hour ago. You don't understand what's going on. It's just divs and divs. So yeah, what we're lacking is what we call functional encapsulation within the web platform. This is a quite common pattern in software engineering in general, but the web platform is a bit behind in this. There have been actually early days examples of this. There was actually a spec that I discovered in 1998 called HTML components. And there are actually two versions of a spec called XML binding language. And they are basically the foundation of web components as we know them today. Let's enter web components. Web components are not Polymer. Most people get confused about it. So they are not. They are a standard from W3C, and Polymer is a library by Google. With web components, we can teach things to the browser. We can teach the browser new elements. They behave exactly like another DOM HTML element. They have the same APIs. They have attributes. They have methods. And they encourage the modularity and they encourage reusability in the browser. They are framework agnostic. They work with every framework. They will work forever as soon as they are in the standard. And they are supposed to be easier to maintain because you don't need to worry about what's going on around them. They are independent. The web components standard is actually made of 4 standards from W3C, of which only one is actually a specification. The other 3 are still a draft. These standards are custom elements, HTML templates, HTML imports, and the shadow DOM. So we're going to quickly go through all of them. Custom elements is basically what enables an author, a developer, to define and use a new element. in the browser. There are two types of custom elements. You have what is called a custom tag, which is basically a completely new element. The developer has full control on it and has also the responsibility to implement it in a semantic way and to make it accessible. And then there are what is called the type extension element, which is basically a new element that inherits from an existing element, which makes it easier for semantics and accessibility, but of course gives less power to the developer. Custom elements are basically just an extension of the HTML element prototype, and they are backed by a JavaScript object, which gives the developer the power of defining a constructor and to react to lifecycle callbacks and to observe attributes callbacks. A quick example. I put two different syntaxes because most sites, as of today, show the left syntax, while the draft that I was reading through shows a few differences. There's also like ES5 and ES6 syntax, but the main differences are the attached callback that got renamed to connected, detached, disconnected, and the document that register element API now has been renamed to custom elements.defined. But the idea behind it is always the same. So you basically extend the prototype or create a new class that extends the HTML element. You define what happens at creation time. You have a few callbacks, getters, setters. It's quite straightforward. And once you register your element, you can just use it. You can create it programmatically through JavaScript, or you can just use it in the DOM. HTML templates are basically inert HTML subtrees, which means that they are not going to be rendered by the browser. And suppose this is our page, we have a template. Templates include document fragments. They are not rendered, but they are accessible through JavaScript. They can be cloned and stamped into the page. We can actually mutate them. We have all the DOM APIs for us, and we can use them, for instance, as in this example, to have a table row, and we can just clone it and insert data in it. So this is very useful for templating. They are fully editable via JavaScript. HTML imports, which is a way to reuse HTML documents within other HTML documents. Sounds a bit tricky, but it's really as easy as putting this link tag in your head, which has the spec defines this new value for the rel attribute, which is import. It behaves, it's basically the require for the web, finally. It behaves like a style sheet, so if you don't specify the async flag, it's going to be a render blocking. And it's got a load and an error event. So you can actually see when the link has been successfully imported. And the DOM is going to be in charge to create this import link list between all the pages and all the documents. It's going to sort out the dependencies for you, so very easy to use. Next, the shadow DOM, which is the tricky part. Combining multiple DOM trees into one hierarchy and how these trees interact between themselves. It sounds a bit tricky, but it actually is encapsulation in a few words. You have in the same page different DOM trees, and the DOM APIs within these trees are scoped. So the style slornik, querying the DOM is scoped as well. Events are retargeted up the chain. IDs can be duplicated within different shadow hosts. They're not going to collapse. And the host document cannot access what's within the shadow tree. To make things a bit more clear, document, we've got two nodes and then another node underneath. If the darker node creates a node underneath called shadow root, it becomes a shadow host. The browser puts around them some boundaries called shadow boundaries. And this is the encapsulation I was talking about. We have still what we call light DOM and shadow DOM. So the light, talking about the shadow host, its light DOM is the content that is not under shadow root, while the shadow DOM is what is under the shadow root. Also, there's another important concept in the shadow DOM, which is slotting. what is called also distributed nodes, distributed content. What before was the content tag and now it's become the slot tag. So as you can see, there's a red node within the shadow tree. And from the shadow host light DOM, there are two childs. Shadow DOM APIs give us the possibility of cherry picking light DOM nodes and dragging them basically in the shadow tree. The browser is going to compose it, the document at rendering time, and that's the result. So basically, that's what the slotting is to inject from the host some content within the shadow tree. Bonus round, like some CSS, because CSS is changing with this. We have a few new pseudo elements, a few new rules. We can just scope styles without a shadow DOM, without shadow roots, or we can use that scope tags, scope context. I'm not sure what's the implementation on this, like how supported they are. When we're working with shadow DOM instead, we can use the host. Host is going to select the shadow host. We can select also the shadow host based on his external context with the other pseudo selectors. Same for the content. We can that now has been actually renamed to slotted, but we can select the light DOM from within the shadow DOM with content. There were a few other selectors like the shadow piercing one, the shadow one, the deep one, but they have been deprecated because they were really powerful. They were actually crossing the shadow boundaries. So they are actually thinking about how to avoid all this power to developers and still make crossing boundaries, I think. CSS variable has been introduced, so really easy to use. This is, I think, quite self-explanatory. And also, CSS mixings. This is not a W3C spec, it's like still in the approval phase. But basically, a way to define as a CSS variable actually a CSS object and apply it somewhere else. So how can we use web components today? Unfortunately, the browser support isn't very broad, apart from Chrome and Opera, which are basically, well, Opera uses Chromium, but Chrome is the main company behind like pushing web components, so they're implementing all of them. Templates also, like being the only standard that has actually a specification, is implemented by all the vendors. HTML imports is the tricky one because apart from Chrome, all other browser vendors are not willing to implement it. Firefox implemented it and then changed its mind because they don't want to ship something that still needs rework. They think that it should use some code in common with the ES6 modules. So they want to wait for this spec to be redefined. And then Safari and Edge, of course, say like, okay, not considering it. Custom elements and Shadow DOM are under a flag in Firefox. You can enable it, but they're really unstable. It breaks your site usually, of course. Safari has actually announced a few weeks ago that you can try Shadow DOM in their technology preview, and they are developing custom elements. While Edge just announced last week at the Web Summit that they are prototyping custom elements in Shadow DOM. So we're almost there. Not quite yet. That's why there are polyfills. There are two flavors of the polyfill. If you want to support evergreen browsers, there's the normal one with all the polyfills, and then there's a light version that is without the Shadow DOM polyfill. That's why, Polymer implements the Shady DOM polyfill, which is a lighter version of it. And the main reason is that the Shadow DOM polyfill is slow, is very slow. Firefox complains about it, doesn't like it. It's not snappy. So everything I said today is probably likely to change in the next month because these are drafts. HTML imports are being reworked right now. They're thinking about implementing the Shadow DOM tag in a declarative way instead of just appending the shadow root via JavaScript. Accessibility, as I said, when you create a custom element, you are in charge of providing accessibility and behavior, semantic behavior. So they are probably wondering if they can help developers doing that with some more primitives. And CSS part styling are basically something similar to CSS mixins, which are basically used to cross the shadow DOM boundaries and style a custom element from the host element. And many more. There are lots of points on the discussion. If you want to use web components in a more safe way, you can use a library. There are three main libraries to use web components. One by Firefox called Xtag, another one called Bosonic, and the third one by Google called Polymer. And we all know that this meetup is focused more on Polymer. So from now on, we're going to talk about this. Yeah, I put in the presentation some useful links, basically all the specs that I've been reading and the web component side, and some cheat sheet for CSS and Shadow DOM. And thank you for listening.
Cool. How's the pizza? Pizza alright? Yeah. Nice. I'm actually impressed that everyone's still here after the pizza. It's all good. So we had the awesome talk by Marco earlier, talking about web components. So I love the idea of web components. It's such a cool idea, especially from a tech lead point of view. If we can have a repository of components, we can just pull in with no extra work. So it's that easy. Yeah. So pull in a component, no extra work. We can share them across projects. It's super awesome. The idea of just having the dream. So you put a comments tag, and boom, you've got a whole comment section in your website. I just love that idea. But obviously, all the HTML import stuff, Safari, not even considering it. What's up with that? So the whole idea of Polymer is going to work on top of web components. And we've got our awesome developer over here. This is Will. He's senior dev at Toaster. So he's going to talk through the ins and outs of actually what goes into Polymer and how it works. And he's got sound technical knowledge. So let's give him a clap. So he's Will.
Cheers, David. Hello, everybody. So I'm going to give you a quick introduction into Polymer. So from Marco's talk, you can see that web components are a really exciting technology. Something we should be using today, but using it just web components at the moment is just not really feasible in production. So this is why we need something like Polymer. So what is it? So web components, like what Marco said, is really, really low level, and to use them requires a lot of boilerplate code. The browser support isn't very good. So what Polymer does is it's a library on top of it, and then uses the polyfills to fill in the gaps. And it basically allows us to build web components really easily. So this is the technology stack which it uses. So we've got the native web components at the bottom, the polyfills above that, and we've got Polymer and then the Polymer elements. Polymer itself is actually very small. It's the polyfills which take up the bulk at the moment. Down the line, what they want to do is completely get rid of the Polymer polyfills when the browsers evolve, and so we'll end up with a stack like this. Now, Polymer is a library, so it's very different to other frameworks out there, such as Angular or Ember. So you need to think a bit differently about how you structure your applications. And to understand that, you need to understand Polymer and web components philosophy, which is everything is an element, and to extend the DOM. So at the moment, like what Marco said, we use elements every day in HTML. We've got video tags, audio tags, they all provide methods, they fire events, they provide attributes, and so what Polymer does is it allows us to create our own versions of these so we can use them across the web. The idea is to build lots of small reusable components that we can then compose together and create apps and websites. So us developers are mostly interested in this top level stack, so that's what I'm going to talk about a bit today. So Polymer provides a lot of extra stuff on top of web components, as long as exposing some of the stuff that web components gives, such as Shelley DOM, properties, computer methods, data binding, observers, templates, all that good stuff. So I'm going to talk about some of these today and give you a brief introduction about it. So first, I'm going to talk about the Shelley DOM, and Marco very briefly covered about what it's about, but the Shelley DOM polyfill is massive, and it's just slow and just horrible to use. So what the Shelley DOM, sorry, the polyfill, not the Shelley DOM itself. What the Shelley DOM does is it encapsulates your element's DOM into its own component and shuts it off from the rest of the document, so you can't access it from outside, which is a really great thing. But it means that when you come to polyfill it, it's really, really difficult, because what you need to do is actually give all the elements to the browser to render. But it means that developers, they need to rewrite a lot of the DOM APIs, so developers can't go outside the scope and so on. Because of that, there's a lot of tree walking, and it means that the polyfill is just expensive. So what the Polymer team did is build something called the Shelley DOM, which basically creates a fake Shelley DOM by namespacing CSS and at the same time makes it very compatible with the native Shelley DOM. So to use it, you need to use Polymer's API, DOM API. So it's very similar to vanilla JavaScript. So you've got all your adding and removing children methods that you can use here. Accessing parent and child APIs is all very familiar. Now there's a couple of extra things here which Polymer provides, which is quite cool. So you've got those last two at the bottom there. These are kind of shorthand methods to get certain elements within the page, within your element. So say for example, if you had an element called test, with the ID test, you do this $test, and that will give you that element. The bottom one there is just a shorthand for query selector rule, so this reduces the code, quite nice. Shelley DOM, however, is not perfect. You still got a performance hit. CSS is namespaced, so what Polymer has to do is it has to add a class to every single element within your component, and then rewrite the CSS so each class is prefixed with that element name. It does mean that CSS is leaked across the app, but it is namespaced, but it's still a bit horrible. But it's way better than using the polyfill, so that's a plus. That's a really brief introduction to it, but there's a really good article online about Shelley DOM, so I recommend going over it. So properties and property observers. These again stuff which isn't stuff which Polymer provides. It's kind of standard across web components, but it's core for making elements. So I'm going to go through some of these. So this is an example of creating free properties in your component. I've created a first name, a last name, typed them as strings, and then I've also created a computer property called full name. So what this does is it runs this method, compute full name, which then takes the two other properties and then runs a little operation and then returns it. And this method is run each time first name and last name is changed, so this updates automatically, which is really, really handy. To actually change something, to actually modify your element, your properties, then you add it as an attribute here. So you've got the first name, the last name, use Marco Ciampini, but yeah, you get the idea. So the computer full name will be Marco Ciampini. Computer methods are very similar. They just, instead of adding it to, instead of assigning it to a property, you just spit out straight into the DOM. Data binding is a wonderful thing. It's something which you should really understand when building an application. if you use it correctly, then it can make your application extremely lean and just really great to use, easy to maintain, and all that stuff. There are two types: data binding, one way and two way. They're both pretty self-explanatory. One way means it goes in one direction, so all the child elements of your property can read it, but they can't write to it. Two way means that any element which has access to that property can write to it as well. When you edit one of the properties, it gets sent down the chain and so on. So there was a talk which was done at the Polymer Summit last year, and this I thought was a really good example about how data binding works. So this is building a very simple chat application. So we've got an iron Ajax element at the left there, which has a last response property, which handles your last request. That is bound one way to a property called threads in your main chat view, and then it's got two other subcomponents. One being the chat list, which is a list of all your chats, and the chat view, which is your main chat window. So when you get your last response, it sends it to the threads, which then updates your chat list, and it's got a selected thread property. So when that's changed, it sends it back up and back down again, and from there you can update the rest of your app. It means that if any of these are changed, then the rest of the app is reactive to it. It's a really handy thing. So the next thing I want to talk about is local DOM templates. So this is really useful for composing your HTML within your element. And some of it is very similar to other templating languages out there. So, for example, mustache or handlebars. So, for example, the top one there, you just print out a variable. If you want to loop over a list of items, what you do is you do the template, and then you put within the items, put your array, and then you can simply loop through. And same, the bottom one is a conditional if. So when happy is truthy, then it will print out yay. Element lifecycle callbacks. So this is something again which isn't specific to Polymer. It's something which it just passes straight from web components, but it gives you a load of callbacks which you can react to when your element is created. So we've got the created element, which obviously is when the element is created, but this is before any of the DOM is initialized and written, and before the properties have been set. The ready callback is where you do most of your initialization, where the DOM has been written and the properties have been set. The attached callback is when it's actually been attached to the DOM. So if you got any event listings you want to listen to document level, then this is where you do it. And the detached one is where you do any cleanup within your element. This is when it's been removed from your DOM. And then finally, we've got the attribute change. This is whenever any of your attributes on your element changes, so you can react to anything from there. Events are really important within components that we use today, so I thought I'd go over these. So there's 3 ways of listening to events. So you've got the top one, which is declarative. You just do on and then the event name. This is all snake case. And then we've got the second way, which is doing it programmatically. So you've got your listen, which is very similar to add event listener. I've also got the unlisten there for detached as well. And then the other method is the listeners object, which is standard with any Polymer component. It just provides an object where you can add a load of listeners into there. Firing events, if you create your own element, you can fire your own custom events from it. So you do this.fire, and then your event name, and then you can pass some data with it. So this would fire upwards. So say, for example, you've got a child component, your parent component can then listen to it. So I've just added a listener there on custom event. When you fire your custom event, this will get fired. Again, you can use any of the methods that I showed in the above slide to listen to them. And then there's iron signals, which is it's kind of a thing you should use if you really have to. It's just a way of firing events across an application. Sometimes you have one component which is way down the DOM tree and a completely different space to another component, and you want to send an event from one place to another. This can become really horrible when you're trying to send an event back up the DOM tree. So what you do is you fire an iron signal. So what you do is you do this.fire, then iron signal with the name of the event. So I've just said hello. And then any element that you want to listen to that event, you attach an iron signal element, and then in the listeners, all you do is iron signal dash the event name. And then anytime this iron signal is fired, it will be picked up by any components which has that iron signal. Again, this is something that can get quite polluted if used all the time, and I would advise not doing it. And the Polymer team also advise just using standard events over these, but it's something which is just more practical sometimes. So if you want to get started on building your own applications, there's a big catalogue of elements you can already use, which is really, really useful. I use this every day. So we've got the iron elements, which has a load of core elements which Polymer provides. It handles stuff like HH requests, media queries, and stuff like that. You've got your paper elements, which is it's basically a set of components for making a website or app, like material design style. So it has a load of cards or buttons which ripple and stuff like that. Google Web Components are for adding Google services to your websites like Google Map or YouTube video. Gold Elements, e-commerce. Neon Elements are for special effects and animations. So these neon animations are a really great way of doing animations within Polymer. It's quite a big subject, so I'm not going to go into it now. Platinum Elements are for service workers, so offline, basically turning your app into a true progressive web app, which is really, really cool. You've got notifications and caching and all that stuff in there. The most recent one is Carbon Elements, and this was released a few weeks ago. And the first element in this is for routing, so that's really handy for single page apps. And a pro tip: if you install the Poly search extension, then you can just type Poly, hit tab, and then search another thing. It will go straight to this website. And then if you want something which isn't in there, there's a load of good websites out there. For example, Custom Elements, which host a load of community uploaded components. Word of warning though, obviously you can't guarantee the quality of the component compared to the Polymer team, but so it's worth doing your research to make sure you're getting the right one. So if you wanted to build your own component, this is sort of a breakdown of how you'd structure it. So even in this big screen, you're never going to be able to read that, but so I'm going to go through it. So you link all your imports at the top. So this is basically just handling all your dependencies. Usually you'd install most of your components through Bower, but if you've got any components you make yourself, you can do exactly the same thing here. You'd wrap your element within a DOM module, and the ID would be your component name. And then we've got a template tag which stores all your CSS and then all of your DOM. So this is in your CSS here. This is where you'd expose your CSS variables and mix-ins if you wanted to make your component customizable. If I go back one. This is also in the DOM. This is where you put your templates tags for your repeating and all that stuff. Right. Properties. This is what I showed you before. The properties. This is where you put all of that. And it is property there. Again, that's just putting the name of your application of your component in. Put all your callbacks that you can use. You don't have to have them there. We'll just put them there just so you can see where they go. And then beneath that is where all your element behavior. So if you've got any custom functions that you want your component to have, this is where they go. So there's a few bits I haven't covered. I mean, it's quite big in terms of what it gives you. Styling the local DOM, that's quite a big subject. I'm sure we'll cover it in another talk. And then there's also behaviors, which is basically giving you, basically allowing you to apply various methods to your elements, and making it really reusable. Yeah, and that's my talk.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I don't know about everyone else. No, but that's awesome because like Polymer is such a massive topic. There's so much stuff that you can go into. So that's why I thought I'd open this up a bit to questions. But first, as a complex project, I'm going to ask my own question. So like from the whole, you're talking about the iron signal a bit. So is there something built in which will help talk about like different components talking to each other? So say you've got like a navigation component that's in a separate area, and you've got a hero component, and you want to communicate between the two. I guess Polymer got something built in for that, or like how would you go about?
So what you do usually, you would encapsulate all of your components into one post. Like if you've got one main element, you'd encapsulate everything in that element, and then sub-elements.
Okay.
And so everything would fire upwards that way. There's nothing, as I can see, which would allow you to fire across out part 9 signals. That's what it's built for.
So like a pub sub thing, so you're going to have to go through something before you get.
That's
Okay.
like what 9 signals pretty much is. Yeah.
Cool.
But yeah, so also you can use data binding as well to fire off different attributes that allow you to observe them and then do things based on that. So yes, you can do lots of different ways.
Cool. So like we'll use as Polymer now, day in, day out. Technical understanding of the variable. I'm going to build you. So if anyone got any questions at all? Yeah?
Browser support?
Browser support. So we support, I think Polymer supports IE10+, and then evergreen browsers. Yeah.
So what are people currently working on? What's your sort of base browser support? You got an IE10? Yeah. Any IE9s? No? Sometimes? IE8?
I6.
IE6?
Oh.
I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. Unfortunately, yes. You have a question?
I have 2 questions. First is attach and detach. There are the lifecycle events, methods which are fired when you attach and detach a component, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can you repeat the question so it gets recorded?
Oh yeah, so the question was about
How attach and detach work, or when they're fired on
Yeah.
the standard.
yeah, so attached and detached. So this happens exactly when it's attached to the DOM and removed from the DOM. So this will be fired as soon as if you add it to the DOM. Yeah.
And then the second question, you showed the link which is a standard for require, and it requires an HTML page, but what does that HTML file have inside, and what it can do? Does it expose just something, or whatever is loaded executes inside of your component, or how it works?
Yeah, so usually your HTML file would contain other components, which would then have their own imports. So it's like required in JavaScript, so each thing would require its own thing. And then, say for example, you needed to put the Polymer library, it would just include the script.
So when you require Polymer, it just adds things to the global namespace of the component, or it also does something?
No, it's I think it's scoped to that specific component. But it means that when it comes to actually compiling everything together, when you release it for production, it will vulcanize all your elements together. So it means that you're not making loads of requests each time you're bringing in a component.
And these imports expose some variables,
Mm-hmm.
like you can import Polymer and then use Polymer as an object, or not?
Yes, I guess that's how it works. Yeah.
Okay.
Do with
When
HTTP2
you
though.
Polymer, it runs the script, it initializes, it defines the element, and then everything else is inside the template, so it's inert. So it's up to you to use it. The moment you use it, it gets attached.
Cool. I think we had another question right at the back. I hope you're not the IE6 guy.
I've experimented with Polymer a bit, and as everywhere it's going to have all the properties inside of the property object. It's possible to do it outside of the properties object, and it works. Also, the binding, for example, I can pass the attribute, let's say first name, and use it inside the template without actually defining the first name property. How does it work? Is that some anti-pattern? Is there something that doesn't work used by that method?
Okay, I might need to get you to read the second one. But the first one, you're talking about you bringing variables outside of the properties objects. So if you did that, it would mean they would be accessible in JavaScript, but you wouldn't be able to set them. They wouldn't expose them to when you actually initialize the element.
Okay.
So you know when you initialize the element, I had first name and snake case. Anything within the properties object would be exposed to that. But if you had anything outside, you'd usually set private variables and stuff like that you put them in there.
Okay.
And the second one, I didn't quite get that one.
I can use inside the template and pass as an attribute. I can use properties which will not be declared inside the properties object or anywhere, and it works. I didn't test all the use cases, so that might be just some edge case.
I don't know. Well, we're going to open this up to a bit of a Q&A as well after the next talk. So maybe I'll catch us in the pub later. Have a quick chat about that.
Yeah.
So any more questions? Take one more.
So when I experimented with Polymer, like was 0.8 version, they were using extensively Object Observe for implementing two-way data binding.
Mhm.
How it works now? How does it work now?
That is something I don't know. It's something magic within the Polymer library.
Application observers are on elements.
It's pre-compiled when you create the element.
Yeah, but you still need something inside of your app lifecycle to tell you that something has changed in your Java cycle. Like
It includes the mutation of the polyfill.
but mutation, okay, whatever. I don't think it's enough.
Let's bring it out there. One more question over you.
Yeah, out of Google's vast portfolio of websites and applications, what in a percentage are using Polymer in production now?
Well, that's a good
That's a
question.
good question. I need to actually look that up.
Yeah.
But we use it. We do a lot of marketing websites for Google, and we use it for probably 95% of the projects we do now.
So in terms of their big ones, like YouTube or anything like that, obviously they're not using it. Is there a reason in terms of migrating the technologies, how hard or how easy is it that are stuck in a certain platform or a certain framework to migrate to Polymer, all their JavaScript and all their front-end styling?
I'm guessing, especially with things like YouTube and stuff, they're such huge giant.
Now Google is now using Polymer in many production websites like Google Play is in Polymer, Play Music is built in Polymer, YouTube Gaming, which is a huge platform, is built in Polymer. So Google is progressively migrating into using Polymer as well in their main production website. So definitely there is a big support by them in production. So, which is a good signal for all of us. I hope.
Cool. So we're going to move it on.
Okay.
We're going to go on to the next talk.
Yeah, so if you want to cover.
Should we bring that back and we'll have a bit of a Q&A after we've had Johnny have a talk, and then we'll have a Q&A and all your questions will save up and we'll go through them then. We've got Johnny here. He's a new developer who started recently at Toaster. So one of the things with Polymer is obviously not a lot of places are using that in production at the moment, but Toaster is using it in production. Johnny's come along. He's a cool hipster coder.
Whoa!
He uses
Okay.
Code. He doesn't even use Express. That's okay. Yeah. So Johnny's used to using many different platforms, things like that, and he's come to Toaster, and we're looking at Polymer. So ask Johnny to ask me, just talk about your journey into Polymer, so how you get used to it, how my first day on polymer kind of thing. So if everyone wants to give him a clap, here's Johnny.
So yeah, like David said, I haven't been here for too long, and I got thrown into the world of polymer. Like you've had two of the flag bearers of polymer from Toaster at the minute, so I was kind of like the new people, the new person on it, and yeah, it's been good. It's been kind of weird, so apologies for anyone who has used polymer and stuff like this. It's kind of like a bit more of a beginner's one, but a practical one. It's like so hopefully if you have used it anyway, it could be useful for you anyway. But it's more, we've heard the theory, we've heard the idea behind it, but if you want to just get your laptop open and start using it, how to do it in the same way that I did it, basically. So there's, like many things on the web now, there's prerequisites. They're not all essential, but if you kind of want to use them, want to use polymer in a sort of serious way, it's useful to look into all of these things. So Node, I mean, Node is great to have on your computer anyway, but Node gets Gulp and NPM gets Gulp and Polymer, Polyserve and other things like this. You also get Bower through it, and Bower is really kind of important for Polymer. It's how Polymer uses all the element catalog. You install it really through Bower and everything like that. So so that's useful. Polylint and Polyserve and WCT is Web Component Tester. They, as far as I know, they're not that essential. Like I say, kind of new to this stuff, so put them in there for good measure, right? But Polylint, Polyserve, and Web Component Tester, yeah, they're things that are more polymer based, so they're more, you know, they're specific. So I think if you want to really use it, look into it, sure. So yeah, so the easiest way to use Polymer, to see it working. Polymer released, and I'm going to see how many times I can say Polymer because I realise how often I'm saying it now. But they released a starter kit, which is very handy. And it comes in two flavours. There's light and there's the full one, which they advise to be in the beginnings or the intermediate. Honestly, I would say if you wanted to just look into how Polymer works, go for the intermediate, go for the full straight away. It's really cool that they did the light thing. You can download it and it runs kind of instantly. But if you want to use it seriously, you may as well get past something like, because Polymer's kind of magic-y anyway, so you may as well immerse yourself in the workflow of how it should work. And if you're going to do it in production, obviously you need the kind of control that the full one allows you to. And just to say, anything with a little magnifying glass, search that word, and then you'll find it as the first result in Google and stuff. So you don't have to think about too much stuff. So yeah, the last two commands basically when you've got the starter kit, npm install, Bower install, and then gulp serve. That's all you need to see Polymer running in your browser straight away, which is very cool. Yeah, so just a brief thing on the starter kit directory structure because it's the Polymer directory structure really. You have this folder called app, and inside app there's an elements folder where you would have all of your components. They would sit inside of elements, and then any of the elements that get called from the index, which is the root, you know, the thing that actually gets served up, need to be referenced in elements.html. So like basically talking about all the HTML imports, anything that's top level. In the same way that JavaScript has like the require methodology and stuff, anything that's top level needs to be required in the top level elements.html. Whereas in the elements themselves, they can require further sub things. Then there's routing.html. It's in there, but I guess it's going to change pretty soon because they've got Carbon root now, which is like routing.html at the minute is just page.js. Which was always a bit weird because it's like kind of the non-Polymer thing in the Polymer starter kit. But yeah, so they got Carbon root now, which is presumably going to become their standard. So that might change, but yeah. Other things, images, styles, and the test folder. It's awesome. So yeah. So besides the starter kit, the things that I kind of find myself in day-to-day coming back to all the time are Polymer docs. They've got quite good documentation on it. Some areas are kind of a bit lack from what they maybe should be, but the docs themselves are fairly good. And so the Polymer DOM API is one of the things that I always come back to search for, because like Will mentioned, they have this API that allows you to interact with your elements and all this sort of stuff. And because there is all this polyfill stuff and certain things are in flux and all this sort of stuff, this is essentially the abstraction from that. If you learn this syntax and you can manipulate your elements and do all the things you need to do with this syntax, you don't need to worry about any of the underlying things that are happening. So really, where possible, use the Polymer API. I know it's kind of weird to like put all your eggs in one basket, but it allows the fact that they can keep working on the spec, they can keep changing things, and you don't have to care about it. And I mean, the comparisons anyway, really not too dissimilar from each other. So that's cool, that's handy. And I say about the DOM API, but really anything that's like event listeners, getting and setting data, everything should be kind of run through the API that you're given. And then the other one is the styling the local DOM docs, specifically kind of the CSS variable stuff, because it is new and it is cool, and it is a bit weird as well. So it's like kind of I always have to go back and check them. But for instance, say my element.html, that's my custom element, and then this list of my elements might be parent to that. It might have a couple of my elements in it. So in my element, I can style it in a way that in the host, I set my color to be blue. In the description of the element, I want the color of the text to be blue subsequently. But then in the parent, I could alter that color from outside of the scope of that element by setting it to be green instead, which is cool. It's almost creating an API for the CSS. It allows you to open certain parts of your element that are otherwise quite scoped and closed, and allows you to alter them from outside of it. So yeah, past that, past the kind of nitty-gritty stuff, the things that help me, there's a series on YouTube called Polycasts by Rob Dodson, who is kind of cheesy, and there's like funny music at the start and all this sort of stuff, but they talk about very interesting things, and Rob Dodson himself is on the Polymer team, so you kind of get it from the source, which is always a nice thing to get, basically. And if you, like, they have very specific titles on things, so if you're looking for something, you'll probably find the video. If you just wanted to learn, I recommend learning from 18 upwards, because it's when they start using 1.0, which is kind of different in a lot of areas from the previous one. So yeah, it's when it gets stable and things. So Polymer element catalog, again, we'll mention it, but it is a very important part of Polymer. It's like the really weird part that like anyone who's a developer, I'm sure you've had that thing where it's like, yeah, there is this thing out here, but I'd kind of like to make my own, just because I guess that's the nature of the beast. But you should kind of get over that. If there's something, say you want a nice input, it's in the Polymer element catalog, you should use it, really, because you get it for free. You get everything for free. You get the ARI roles, you get the tab index, you get all these things that you might not necessarily consider yourself. They've already been sorted, which is cool, because you get to put like a whole day work in your like timesheet, but you've only done an hour, so it's fine. And then I don't do that, just to say. So then, yeah, anything outside of element catalog, I don't really use custom elements.io, and I know it's bad for me to like kind of show just one of the things, but it's a nicely fleshed out site. I don't personally use it, but it is cool. It's not bound to the certain life cycles that Polymer has. It's people independently making stuff like should be happening in web technology stuff. So yeah, it's worth checking out if there's some like crazy element that you want that doesn't exist. So this slide is a little bit edgy because it's like my opinion stuff. And like I said, Polymer is really cool, and I have really enjoyed using it. But there are some weird things that I guess like a junior dev, I had to think about and almost change my opinion on and stuff like that. So because of Polymer, in a way you make custom elements and you can scope things to all certain parts, it's worth, where possible, modularizing your elements. So take it like a table. The table already is modularized in its essence, but you could have a table element, a row element inside that table element, and then you could have cell elements inside that as well. And there is like an overhead to that, but really the benefit of being able to keep everything looking after themselves. So the cell, all it has to do is take data and it has to display it in a certain way. A row, all the row has to do is take cells and just sort them properly. And a table, all the table has to do is think about the rows. They all have their things to do then, and it makes it like, it splits up basically, splits up the workflow, and means you don't have these like huge files in the end. Bubble upwards, again, another thing that's been gone over all the time, but it was a really weird thing for me to think about, because obviously everyone takes like on click and on change and stuff for granted. But when you can create custom elements, which is very handy, you have to then start thinking about how they get used as well. So here, I know it's probably kind of hard to read, but I've got parent element with brother and sister element underneath. And if brother element wants to talk to sister element, they have to, sorry, it sounds so stupid. Brother element has to talk to parent element, who can then talk to sister element. Maybe they're
As it should be.
the other side of the country or something. So say brother element sends a custom event. It can't just talk to sister element. I know there's iron signals, but really, it's better to think this out at the start. So brother element has to talk to parent element can talk to sister element. And then, to really reiterate, because it was something that I had to really get over, was avoid the tendency to write from scratch, because it's really sort of pointless in the Polymer ecosystem. If there's things that are in the element catalog already, use them. I wouldn't be afraid to use them. There's just a lot of things that we've run into where it's like, you start making your own thing and it snowballs. It's like, oh, you realize we've got to do this as well, right? And it's like, oh yeah. It snowballs. So like, if it's there, use it. That's basically my start for how I started. Yeah.
Properly good, man. Yeah, isn't it awesome seeing like CSS variables? Like, I do like that, although the syntax is a bit weird. But it's like, again, I'm going to open up a list of questions, but I'm going to dive in first. So you talk about wanting to use the poly scaffold, and you kind of supporting that, say you should look at doing that first. It's like, my experience with boilerplates and scaffolds and things like that tend to be a bit bloated. There's a lot of stuff in there, you end up just stripping it all out and then using it. Like, what's your experience of using the poly scaffold? Do you feel like you're digging out of someone else's code, or?
It is a bit weird. Like, it's there. So they give the starter kit is like an example app, which is cool. It's got pages so you can see the routing, certain other things that you can see. But obviously, it's a very good place to start if you want to make your own app as well. It's got all the dog tasks and the structure and all this sort of stuff. So I do find that I am deleting the stuff a lot. Like, I just take the stuff and delete the stuff I don't want from it. But the thing, like, the amount that it sets up for you is kind of, it's worth it. So you do have to dig some of their code out.
With the best practice, at least.
But yeah, it's like, best practice. And really, the only stuff you're removing is kind of like DOM elements anyway. So it's not you having to dig around in JavaScript and stuff like that.
Okay. Cool, man. So what we did is we planned on having a bit of a Q&A. So save any questions you got for Johnny for our Q&A. But like, before we start the Q&A, like, seriously, these talks were awesome. Like, thanks very much. I get to work with these guys every day. It's so nice to work with. Super.
Can't wait for them.
Awesome. No man, they're sharp, they're on it, they know their shit. So like, big round for Johnny, Will, So, any questions about polymer? Bring it on. And one of these guys will try and answer. Hey man.
Testing.
Testing. Polymer's awesome for testing. Is it?
Marco's going to be the person for this one.
No, well, he mentioned WCT even if he doesn't like it. But basically, you can unit test components. It's based on Mocha, Chai, a few things. You basically have the suite ready for you. If you actually download the starter kit, you're going to have a few components and tests written for them. And if you download an NPM module called Polyserve, you can actually run locally a server which exposes to you the web component that you wrote, kind of a README page, a demo, and tests. So it runs the tests for you. You can spawn all the browsers. It's based on a lot of standard tools like Mocha, Chai, Selenium, Sinon. Basically, you can. It's there. You can just search for it. It's called WCT, Web Component Tester.
So is that built into the Poly startup or Poly startup?
It's in the starter kit, yeah.
Okay.
You get it together with the starter kit. Yeah.
Cool. Anyone else? Hey.
In the real world projects that you started building at Toaster, what is the ratio between components that you are using from this library that has all these elements and the ratio between the components that you build on yourself?
Good question.
That's cool.
Shall I take them? Yeah. So what we
Yeah,
usually do.
I think it's better if you can repeat the questions because otherwise because
right.
we have like a microphone here, otherwise it gets lost the question.
Yeah. Okay. So the question was, what's the ratio between using elements from the catalog and custom elements to us building them ourselves? So what we usually do is structure our websites modularly. So we usually create little elements which then use a lot of the elements from the catalog. So for example, if you wanted to create a card, like a card space, we'd use a paper card, but then we'd host that within our own custom element, which would handle a lot of the data binding that we want to use within our app. So say for example, we created a website which had like a sign up for newsletter button or something like that. We'd have our own custom component which would handle the talk between the various elements, so like the AJAX request, the iron inputs, the paper buttons, all that stuff would be from the catalog, but then we'd host it within our own element to control it. Does that make sense?
Yes, but roughly what would be the ratio?
What would be the ratio?
How
Ratio.
much code do you not write? Because the point is apparently to reuse the components.
Mm.
So it's an inspiration to use as many reusable components as we can. We're still sort of ironing out exactly how we're going to make a good sort of library to push that up. What would you
Say
rate?
like 40% of reusable components, 60 at the moment, but it grows. As we keep using it, we find maybe, I recently had to work on a site where we had a button that would open, like, let's say a YouTube video that would be in a lightbox. And open, like you could open that lightbox from a lot of places from the site. So I didn't want to use, to have like to spawn 10 YouTube videos instances. So I created like my own component, which is a lightbox and the YouTube video inside, and a few ways to open it, like from a button with an ion signal, with just data binding. And so I spent some more time than usual for that project, but then I took that element, put it in a different repo, and now we're using it in other 4 websites. So as you find yourself working on things and you realize that this is a pattern that you're going to use again, you want to spend some more time on it, take it apart, make sure it works, and then reuse it. So yeah, it's maybe 60-40 right now, but I'm pretty sure it's going to increase to be more balanced. So hopefully gaining time. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Anyone else? Hey.
The
components that you're making so far, have you published any back into the community, or is what you're doing quite specific to the
Yeah,
websites you make?
So Marco actually gave an example of the YouTube component, so he's published that. And we've also got a few others which we've put on our repo, haven't we?
Yeah.
So
We happen to use a library for a carousel quite often. The problem is that library isn't coded with the shadow DOM in mind, so there's a few problems in terms of styling, scoping, and actually when inserting, let's say you want to loop through all your slides, infinite loop, you're going to duplicate the slides, and that's how you create the infinite loop. But that actually doesn't notify the shadow DOM. So there's a few problems in that library. What we've done, we wrote our own behavior in Polymer that takes care of all these issues. So that's one thing that we recently published, the model YouTube component. I'm probably missing another one. I did, my first one was actually a DEM behavior, so you can just make sure you don't have to type all the time. So VM classes is quite silly, but it was mostly for me to understand how to write a component, write demo for it, write tests, and publish it on the bubble registry. Yeah, but definitely we are going to publish more. So I think it's for everyone who's using this, it's in everyone's interest to publish back to the community, what is fine, because you can always learn. It's always going to be something positive.
Cool. Have you got a second question?
Yes, I do. So
Okay.
I just got asked, so Angular,
I saw something today of someone using data binding between Angular and Polymer. I mean, we haven't tried it ourselves, but I'm sure there's.
Are you asking if we can use Polymer with Angular, or
I know you can do
or would
that,
you compare
but, like,
comparing
personally,
Angular
you
to-
guys using Polymer, surely you can try Angular. What would you say?
It is a Polymer meetup, I suppose. Maybe she's.
We love Polymer.
I think we are comparing to.
I want to be able to go back to other people and say, oh, you should definitely use Polymer because.
Oh
Yeah. I think you're trying to compare two things which are not really the same as well. One of the big things, like Angular is a full framework, it does everything from root and templates all the way through, where Polymer is very specific about individual, it's about using web components like web components should be used. It's smoothing the gaps between all the browsing compatibilities for web components and going with the future of the way the browsers are working towards web components in that aspect of it. That's my opinion.
What's also nice is that obviously with a lot of frameworks like Angular and Ember, they provide you a lot of code that you're probably not going to use in your application. And Polymer is very much imported if you want to use it, so it keeps your projects very lean. You know exactly what's going to be in there.
Like with other big frameworks as well, it feels like so you got the raw DOM and HTML, and then you got your framework, and there's a black box of magic, and then you're dicking about on the top. Like Polymer feels a bit more like you're using real JavaScript, you're using the DOM, it's using the actual real components of the web. I think that's maybe the benefits for me for Angular to Polymer.
Yeah, basically you pick what you need. If you need some more guidance, I think, if not now, soon, everything is going to play nicely together with Polymer and with components in general because they are standard, and that's like the beauty of them. Another thing is that the Polymer team is on the roadmap. They have also app-like components. So in case you need more of an app structure, you'll be able to get like some more components. Routing is the first. They're going to provide solutions for instantiations. They're going to give more guidance to developers in terms of structuring components and making them work together. So this is something they're definitely looking into. But yeah, they are not the same things. It's a framework, one is a library. So they are quite different.
Cool. I think we had another question. Guy in the white t-shirt? Did you have your hand up a second ago? Yeah? Oh, someone around there. I thought there was a hand up earlier. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah?
Well,
There we go. Go on.
Yeah, the question.
Go on then.
when's the next meetup?
Ooh. That's a really good question.
Yeah, I think we are gonna skip next month, which is May, because there is Google I/O. I'm sure they're gonna announce more improvements to Polymer during Google I/O. So we are gonna wait to digest these changes, and then we are gonna do one in June, let's say
Yeah.
mid-June,
Yeah.
early June, something like that.
Cool.
We're going to be open mic.
Yeah.
One more question.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
So, in terms of sizes in kilobytes and bytes, how much, how big can a polymer file can grow, and is it possible to minimize the JavaScript?
So like so the questions about the size of Polymer and how it sort of affects the file size. So like the actual Polymer library itself, what is that?
I think it's really big.
It's pretty small.
About 14 kilobyte, 14.
About 14K.
Gzipped.
Is that gzipped or is that
Yeah.
just?
There are 3 layers in Polymer. There's like mini, micro, and then Polymer. So you can actually, in case you want really to be optimized about it, you can decide what to import. But yeah, I think it's roughly 14K.
Okay.
And then of course it builds up as you add components. So if you import other components, they add up. And as I said before, as we are all waiting for HTTP2, it's coming slowly. At the moment, the best solution, like for production, is to use a tool called Vulcanizer, which bundles everything together, parses the imports, and just puts them in the right order, like JavaScript requires. And then for CSP security reasons and just in general, you can split the JavaScript out of it, and you can compress it, you can mangle it, you can even run Clojure, Google Clojure, if you have the right externs through it. So it's in the end just a JavaScript file.
So I think once it's vulcanized and things like that, it's just a few K per component, really. Obviously, size of the component varies.
And of course, if the site is complex, there's going to be code. So,
Yeah.
but
you get the benefit that once you've done your component, you just repeat the main markup, but
Yeah.
you don't repeat the actual code for the component. Yeah. So that's a big saving in terms of file size.
Cool. Other question? Hey, Ron.
Yeah, in terms of everyone embracing like native web components, obviously you mentioned like the other libraries like Xtag, and now that's Mozilla and Google is Polymer is very much a Google thing. How are you going to stop like Mozilla and Google and other people going in their specific directions rather than towards one native spec of web components? How do you prevent that?
I think the reason why everyone is embracing Polymer or Xtag is that using native technologies is quite difficult at the moment because they keep changing. So I think definitely Polymer is getting, if anything, like a success because of their APIs not changing every month. So they take care of the heavy lifting for you. The drawback, as I was saying before, is that if you use a library for creating a component, then you must use the same library for instantiating it. So everything that we build today in Polymer, we must be aware that we will need Polymer in the future to instantiate it. So yeah, but we don't have really a choice as of today. If you want to do something that is production ready, you need to use a library at the moment because the technologies are changing, they're not supported, they're not stable.
I suppose that the thing is as well is that like the spec is being decided kind of away from Polymer and things like that. So even when that becomes standardized, you'll essentially just be left with a library that helps you work with the elements anyway. So it's like Polymer and Xtag can kind of work not really caring about necessarily the spec. Obviously they have to care about it, they have to sort it out. But like at the end when it is standardized, you could still use Polymer as just a helpful library on top of creating elements anyway, I guess, right?
I guess the only thing you've got then is you have to stick with one, like you said. It can't be, once you've gone in one direction, a migration on a big site is going to be like, it's not going to be possible.
Well, definitely you don't want to use both on the same project.
Right.
It's like, doesn't make sense.
But then if we get further down the line, in theory, when we can get rid of a lot of the Polymer stuff, the transition at that point would actually be quite easy.
To native web components.
Yeah, to native web components.
Yeah, but it's not going to be any soon.
That is true.
No, anytime soon. Yeah.
No.
Okay, cool. Any more questions? Otherwise, we'll head to the pub. Yeah?
Which is the best part of tonight.
Yeah. So any other questions you want to ask these guys, just come and grab them in the pub. We're going over to the Crown, so if you just go straight over that street, opposite in that weird triangle thing. There's a pub over there called the Crown. It's got a bit of an outside space. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for coming. Actually, lovely. Thank you. Thanks for all the speakers, and I'll see you soon for here. Cheers now. Thanks, man.